And I hate to use the word database because that's just a storage mechanism. What I've got is information on people. I may not be able to demonstrate compliance. It may not be accurate. It could be old. How do you go about dealing with the information that you hold now before May the 25th of next year? What practically can people do to ensure compliance?
I mean, I think Helen, in a sense, has already addressed this issue in part through auditing. I mean, one of the things that I think one needs to do when you've got existing data is you are going to have to work out where you got that data from, how you got it. Did you acquire it in a DPA, in a data protection compliant manner? I mean that's one of the things you need to do, and you've also got to determine whether it's up-to-date, accurate, and everything else. But you have really got to try to work out where this data came from, because if you're going to keep it going forward, you need to keep it in accordance with the law, and the law has certain requirements about that data. So unfortunately, there really isn't a substitute for doing some sort of audit on this data, trying to assess where it came from. Was it collected? I mean, if it was collected from candidates directly without providing lawful, privacy notices and so forth, there are going to be issues on whether that was properly obtained or not. There may be ways you can rectify that going forward in terms of communicating with people you have their data, seeking it to be updated and so forth, which is stage 2, I guess. But stage 1 is to work out where you got it from and what are the issues around that data.
I mean, certainly for data in your database provider should be able to help you just look at some of that data. I mean, I've never met a search consultant who's ever wanted to get rid of any data, ever. Please come and shake my hand if you've ever done that. But it's a wrench, to get rid of some of this data. So, but if you take a long, hard look at what's in your database, a lot of it will be really old. So you've got to think about, does this mean is this data accurate? Because you are required to keep data accurate. You're required not to keep data longer than is necessary. All right. So this goes back to your data policy, your compliance document, and you set out your retention policy around that. So part of that then would be going back and saying, well, okay, is it really relevant to keep somebody's data from 6-10 years ago? Is it really, really relevant now? Do we want to spend the cost of updating that? So, you need to think about where you're going to draw the line. And I think, certainly, Alex, you've done a number of analysis of people's databases. Yep. Where, well, you can sort of, the stats around, just names with no contact data, or there's all sorts of statistics, aren't there, around that? Yeah,
we looked at how to prioritise that data, because there's looking at the data you really don't need, and then there's looking at the data that's of some value, prioritising that value and prioritising your effort. And if you've been in touch with them the last couple of years and you've got a valid email address that you can approach them on, then actually a lot of things I think will be very open to an approach on that. If it's 5 years old, you've got no contact information, you don't know anything about them, there's an argument, it was brought up before, that it's a liability. It's not an asset to your business anymore, it's potentially a liability to your business. And that comes back down to things like data breaches, and ensuring things like bring your own device. And if my mobile phone's not encrypted and I were to lose it, what happens? I know there's some confusion around data breach reporting and what it really means.
I think also, if you think about what's high value, so if you think about if you've just got data that's been publicly sourced, it's going to be easy to get that again. Obviously, if you've got candidate reports and conversations with candidates that are now out of date, that's going to be valuable information to you. So you're probably going to want to spend the time actually renewing contact with those people to make sure you can hold that data going forwards. The other thing to have a look at around data cleaning, which is really worth mentioning, is the comments that you've written there, because although under the Data Protection Act at the moment people can still ask to see their data, people very, very rarely do it. Has anybody actually already had somebody ask to see their data from the business? One. Okay. So I think if we were sitting here, in 2 years' time, I think probably all of you will be showing your hands in terms of who's wanted to see data that you're holding on them, because this is going to become a new norm again, I think. So particularly under the UK proposed new bill for data protection, if you alter data after the point that somebody's asked to see it, that could then incur a criminal charge. So if you have got something that you are not happy that somebody, you don't want somebody to see that, you think, well, I won't send them that, and that gets altered, then you are really entering very dangerous territory. So my recommendation is that you do some cleaning up. If you know you've got consultants who have particular ways of describing people, which are not particularly complimentary, which you wouldn't want people to see, or they use certain sorts of words, I suggest you get onto that, get your database supplier to help you with cleaning up some of that data. So do a data cleanse. Somebody came up with a lovely word for this the other day, but yeah, so that's definitely worth doing.
And I think that comes on to another point as well, that we're kind of discussing what happens after the 25th of May. There's an ongoing education of your staff as well. They have to remember that actually anything they enter into that database could potentially be exposed back to that candidate. And it's not that consultant that will suffer the reputational damage if there's anything derogatory that's put in there. It's your business. So you have to educate your staff and put appropriate penalties in place should they be found doing something along those lines. So staff training is paramount importance going forward as well.
And it's probably worth considering that the population of individuals that would submit a data request are more likely to be people that maybe it was a candidate that made it along in a search but then was dropped once they were presented to the client. They might want to know why. I think that's probably a category that's more risk, higher risk.
Yeah, yes, because I mean, you could, there is a risk that you get sucked into lawsuits around, say, discrimination or other areas of employment law just by virtue of being involved in the recruitment process. And of course, a candidate who wants to make those sorts of arguments will be trying to get information from, I mean, in my experience of status requests, they tend to happen a lot in the context of potential litigation. They're exercises to gather information to fuel a lawsuit potentially, often. And so, I think what we're suggesting is being sensible. If you're going to record information about a candidate, think about what you need to record for your business purposes. Expressions of opinion, you need to think quite carefully as to what you put there. I mean, certainly, if you look at other contexts of employment law, for example, it's very common now when people apply for references, all you get back is something very anodyne that simply says someone worked for us for a period of time and that's about it. And that's because there is and I'm not, well, that's right, whatever your views on that, there is an issue about being defensive, unfortunately, in a culture which is increasingly litigious.
I think that goes back to something Helen said earlier. Don't treat the GDPR as a burden, but it is a cultural change for your business. It has to flow from top management all the way down to the staff, and everyone has to understand what the obligations are on you as a business, what the obligations are on each of your employees and how they treat this data. So it's not a quick thing. It's not a tick box exercise. There's a lot of work that you're going to have to do and maintain going forward.